Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the Life Divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter, The Philosophy of Rebirth, and we're on page 772, beginning with the line, all the known circumstances.
Yeah. So, we have just read one paragraph before this one, the first paragraph. So, I'll just read the summary and then we'll go on to what we have to read today.
Good.
Yeah. In the physical universe, both birth and death are mysteries that man cannot fathom. Life itself, taken for granted, becomes a mystery because of these two events. In the general background of ever-present death, there is a constant outburst of life. Matter itself, inert and lifeless, seems to be the origin of conscious life. This is enough to perplex man. When we look closer, it appears that life is inherent in matter. But again, it is possible that both matter and life are the creations of some universal energy, and life just waits to emerge when the conditions are conducive for birth. Thus, both matter and life seem to be creations of some spirit. This is what he has said. So now we go to the para that we will read today. All the known circumstances and results of birth presuppose an unknown before, and there is a suggestion of universality, a will of persistence of life, an inconclusiveness in death, which seem to point to an unknown hereafter. Okay. What were we before birth, and what are we after death are the questions, the answer of the one depending upon that of the other, which the intellect of man has put to himself from the beginning without even resting in any final solution. The intellect indeed can hardly give the final answer, for that must, in its very nature, lie beyond the data of the physical consciousness and memory, whether of the race or of the individual. Yet, these are the sole data which the intellect is in the habit of consulting with something like confidence. In the poverty of materials and in this incertitude, it wheels from one hypothesis to another and calls each in turn a conclusion. Moreover, the solution depends upon the nature, source, and object of the cosmic movement, and as we determine these, so we shall have to conclude about birth and life and death, the before and the hereafter. Okay, so what he is saying is that we don't know anything about what we were before, and we don't know what will happen to us afterwards. But we are being born in the physical world, so our the question of birth and death seems to be related to the universality, to the universe. So therefore he is saying that there is a suggestion of universality. There is a suggestion of universality, and there is a will of persistence in life. Nobody wants to die. Even the ones who commit suicide, there is a great hesitation in them, and some can't even do it finally.
Yeah.
Okay, so an inconclusiveness in death. After death, what happens? Nobody knows, seems to know. And yet, man has always bothered about these, and they are looking for solutions without finding any solutions. That's what he's saying. So we'll read the summary of what we read just now, and then we'll go on to the next. The little that we know of birth and death is the universal nature of both. They exist everywhere. The dogged persistence of life all creatures cling to life and fight to prolong life and the uncertainty after death. So these are the only things we know, that it is something universal. Death and birth are there everywhere in the universe, even inanimate things. Okay, so, and then there's also the question of persistence of life. Why do people, they don't want to die? So there's something that is a mystery there also. And finally, the uncertainty after death. These are the only three things that we know. It is related to the universe, there is a will to live, and there is an uncertainty after death. So we have to go and try to find out, these are the only known factors. What are we before birth and what are we after death? Both these questions which man asks himself without success. Man's intellect is limited and narrow and can never fathom the depths of these questions. We can also perceive that the solution to birth and death is linked to the larger question of the purpose, trend and aim of universal existence. We are coming into the universe, but how did the universe come into being? What is the purpose? Why are we coming into the universe? We could have come somewhere else. Okay, all these questions are there. So, when we discover the secret of existence and its meaning, then the solution to the problem of birth and death also can be known. So we have to know the purpose of creation. Why was it at all created? That's what he's saying in this para.
I have a little story to tell you. It's not much, but for me it's important. My brother Dennis, who passed away last year, was a kind of happy-go-lucky comedian kind of guy, always cheerful and everything else. And when his wife called me when he passed away, she said, you know, he said one interesting thing. He was lying there quietly and he said to me, I can go now. And he passed immediately. Interesting that he chose at that moment to say that and to go.
Yeah, it seems to be a conscious death.
Ah, yes, yes. And I never would have thought that, knowing my brother. No interest in philosophy or religion or anything.
Yeah.
I can go now.
Yeah. There have been some cases here in the ashram also like that. One of my colleagues, his name was, he was a co-student actually with me, and when he knew that he is going to pass away, he called his family members and apologized to them and said that if I have done any wrong to you, please excuse me. Okay, so after this he passed away. So that was the last thing he told his family members. Excuse me for all the problems that I have created for you, and he passed away after that. So.
Next para.
Yeah. So, I read the next para. The first question is whether the before and the after are purely physical and vital, or in some way and more predominantly mental and spiritual. So, is our birth and death related only to the physical and vital world? Vital also because you see life everywhere, so it must be there. Or is it something more? Is it something mental or spiritual? If matter were the principle of the universe, as the materialist alleges, if the truth of things were to be found in the first formula arrived at by Brighu, son of Varuna, when he meditated upon the eternal Brahman, matter is the eternal, for from matter all things are born, and by matter all beings exist, and to matter all beings depart and return. Then no further questioning would be possible. So this is a quotation from the Taittiriya Upanishad, where Bhrigu is made to Understand first that matter is the reality, then life is the reality, and then matter is reality. So it goes on like that. So that's he's quoting from there. Before the before of our bodies would be a gathering of their constituents out of various physical elements through the instrumentality of the seed and food under the influence perhaps of occult but always material energies, and the before of our conscious being a preparation by heredity or by some other physically vital or physically mental operation in universal matter, specializing its action and building the individual through the bodies of our parents, through seed and gene and chromosome. He is supposing now that only the physical world exists. If so, we are made from elements of matter, and the instrumentation is the parents, and the heredity is passed on through gene, chromosomes and the seed. So that's what he's saying. The after of our body would be a dissolution of the material elements, and the after of the conscious being a relapse into matter with some survival of the effects of its activity in the general mind and life of humanity. So, before you are born, you are created from the material universe. Carbon, calcium, whatnot, all other things, and taken, and a body is built, and the body is built by the parents through seed and chromosome. But after death, is there any survival? We don't know. But there is something, what you have left over. For instance, you may have planted a tree. So that survives your death. Or you may have invented something. Or you may have written a poem. So those survive after death. That's all we know. But you don't survive after death. What you have done survives after death. The after of the body would be a dissolution of the material elements, and the after of the conscious being a relapse into matter with some survival of the effects of its activity in the general mind and life of humanity. This last quite illusory survival would be our only chance of immortality. But since the universality of matter can no longer be held as giving any sufficient explanation for the existence of mind, and indeed matter itself can no longer be explained by matter alone, for it does not appear to be self-existent, we are thrown back from this easy and obvious solution to other hypotheses. So, the first hypothesis is rejected, that is, that matter is the only thing. So, man must be a combination of matter and life, but of something else also. It can't be that it's only this, because matter itself is not self-existent. Okay. So, I read the summary of the para. The first point to be considered is whether birth and death are purely physical or whether they are created by mental and spiritual realities. If matter is the only reality, as some insist, then birth is nothing but a gathering of some physical elements suitable to build a physical body. The before of birth would be the heredity and food from parents, even as a fetus. Even when you are a fetus, you are taking in food from your mother. So you are being built by the heredity of your parents and the food. Food is matter, it is coming in and building your body. That's what they is saying. The after would be the dissolution of that physical form into the very original elements that were aggregated to form it in the first place. So the material that you gather to make a body, after death, that's all the materials go back to where they came from. Your body is made from matter, it goes back into matter.
Have you read about this Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk
No.
Well, he was killed recently, murdered.
Yeah, I've heard about him. Yeah.
And all his thing was religion, basically religion, and the sacredness of the fetus. So no abortion at any stage. It was very much disputed.
The after would be the dissolution of that physical form into the very original elements that were aggregated to form it in the first place. So you came from matter, you go back into matter. Okay, so yeah. The after would be the survival of some of his activities. For instance, the apple tree that he planted, or the house that he built, or the book that he wrote, and the scientific discovery that he made, these are surviving. But he himself does not survive. Okay? So these are the survivals after death. Okay. The inventions he left for mankind. But physically, nothing would remain of the form. But materialism itself is being challenged, and we shall have to seek for subtler and truer solutions, renouncing the rigidity of matter. So the first hypothesis that matter is the only reality, we reject, because even matter itself is being questioned. Okay. So we go to the next para. There are other hypotheses. So let's examine some of them. That's what we're saying. One of these hypotheses is the old religious myth and dogmatic mystery of a God who creates constantly immortal souls out of his own being, or else by his breath or life power entering, it is to be presumed, into material nature, or rather into the bodies he creates in it, and vivifying them internally with a spiritual principle. As a mystery of faith, this can hold and need not be examined, for the mysteries of faith are intended to be beyond question and scrutiny. But for reason and philosophy, it lacks convincingness and does not fit into the known order of things. For it involves two paradoxes which need more justification before they can even be accorded any consideration. First, the hourly creation of beings who have a beginning in time but no end in time, and are, moreover, born by the birth of the body but do not end by the death of the body. So, secondly, their assumption of a ready-made mass of combined qualities, virtues, vices, capacities, defects, temperamental and other advantages and handicaps, not made by them at all through growth, but made for them by arbitrary fiat, if not by law of heredity, yet for which and for the perfect use of which they are held responsible by their Creator. So he is discussing the Christian theory. Okay? So I'll read the summary which will explain what he is saying. So, one such explanation is the religious dogmatic myth that God creates souls out of himself and breathes life into the created bodies. As an item of faith, we need not examine the theory because faith is beyond the ken of mental understanding. But reason and philosophy have to be satisfied too, and there this theory fails badly on two counts. Number one, souls are created in time but do not end in time. They are immortal. These souls come into existence with the birth of the bodies but do not end with the death of the bodies. There is a problem. Okay? Then second question, souls created come into the world with a ready-made set of qualities and shortcomings. A body is created and God is breathing life into it, and God is creating that, so they is coming already with a ready-made set of virtues, values, whatever it is.
Sins.
Ready-made. This is in opposition to the theory of reincarnation, where the soul itself creates its own qualities through many lives. So that's what he is pointing out. Okay, that's the difference. Souls created come into the world for this theory with a ready-made set of qualities and shortcomings which are not of their own making. In the Indian idea, the soul is creating its own karma. Yes. But in this system it is not. A soul is breathed, a ready-made soul is breathed into a body, and you are judged on something that you have not created yourself. Okay, that's what Swami is pointing out. But souls created come into the world with a ready-made set of qualities and shortcomings which are not of their own making, by their own growth or evolutionary effort, but which are thrust upon them by their Maker. And yet finally, these souls are judged and held responsible for God, by God. So, I have made you what you are, but you are responsible for what you are now. That's not logical. Okay? So, on these two counts, the explanation of this hypothesis is most unsatisfactory. Last time we discussed also that there is, that will come to the next para, he said. It's a very interesting logical thing. Okay, so. Okay, I read the next para. We may maintain, provisionally at least, certain things as legitimate presumptions of the philosophic reason and fairly throw the burden of disproving them on their denier. Now, this is a very interesting thing. So, Srimad is saying that I will assume something. It's an assumption. You can challenge me. But if you challenge me, I am not going to prove my assumption, but I challenge you to disprove my assumption. That's what he's saying. And one of them is this, that which is created in time must necessarily end in time. And that which is uncreated will live forever, it can never die. So this is my theory. If you want, you can disprove it. It's very difficult to disprove it. Okay, so among these postulates is the principle that which has no end must necessarily have no beginning, have had no beginning. All that begins or is created has an end by cessation of the process that created and maintains it, or the dissolution of the materials of which it is compounded, or the end of the function for which it came into being. Okay, so if there is an exception to this law, it must be by a descent of spirit into matter, animating matter with divinity, or giving matter its own immortality. So, but the spirit itself, which so descends, is immortal, not made or created. If the soul was created to animate the body, if it depended on the body for its coming into existence, it can have no reason or basis for existence after the disappearance of the body. It is naturally to be supposed that the breath or power given for the animation of the body would return at its final dissolution to its maker. If, on the contrary, it still persists as an immortal embodied being, there must be a subtle or psychic body in which it continues, and it is fairly certain that this psychic body and its inhabitant must be pre-existent to the material vehicle. It is irrational to suppose that they were created originally to inhabit that brief and perishable form. An immortal being cannot be the outcome of so ephemeral an incident in creation. So if the soul remains but in a disembodied condition, then it can have had no original dependence on a body for its existence. It must have subsisted as an unembodied spirit before birth even as it persists in its disembodied spiritual entity after death. So, Swami is discussing the Christian theory, and he is saying that there are two things which are a little problematic. Okay? But to escape this problem, the soul which is coming into the body is not created. It is something pre-existent. Okay? So that's what he is saying. I'll read the summary, then it will become clear. Okay. The arguments against the Christian theory. A fair and reasonable hypothesis is that which has no end has no beginning. The burden of proof can be thrown on the challenger. So, you want to disprove me, but you won't be able to do it. Okay? So, all that is created in time must end in time when the purpose or function of the created is completed. Now, this I told you that there are two things in the Gita also, in the Bhagavad Gita. That which is in existence can never go out of existence, and that which is not in existence can never come into existence. So, again the same thing, this is a presupposition, but in the Gita it is something seen spiritually as a truth. But logically, if you want to disprove it, try. You will not be able to disprove it. Okay? Then the other thing is that even in science, the total amount of energy in any given system remains the same. It may change its form. Sunlight can be turned into electricity. Electricity can be turned into mechanical energy. Okay? Mechanical energy again can be turned into anything you want. You can run an engine. Okay? So, but the form changes, but the total amount of energy remains the same. So, it is very similar to what we are saying here also. Okay, so now Srila is saying, so if we have to make an exception to this rule, okay, if at all an exception is possible, it must be that a spiritual element descends into the physical body, not something created, but something which always was. It's coming in. Then it is possible. Okay. Otherwise, to suppose that a soul is created so that it can enter a body that has come into existence without any reason is illogical. That's what Shabda is saying. Okay? If a soul is created to enter into a physical body and depends upon it for its birth, coming into existence, then why would it subsist after death of body? If the body goes, then that also disappears. It cannot remain. The breath given to the body would return to the origin. Again, if the spiritual element, soul, continues to exist after dissolution of body, then it must be a spiritual immortal element which existed before birth of body. So, this is the opposite of the Christian theory. An immortal spiritual entity cannot be created for such an ephemeral, brief period of time to inhabit a mortal material body. It must be quite independent of the existence or non-existence of the body. So what Shamda is saying is interesting. He is saying that the soul is immortal. Even in Christianity, once it is created, it is immortal. An immortal soul is being created to exist in a mortal body. So illogical. So the immortal soul will remain. But why should it be created for going into a finite thing? Why should the infinite be created to remain in a finite form? It's not logical.
But what actually is entering into the body? Is it, it's not the soul, is it?
It's the soul that is coming in.
The soul comes in.
Yeah.
But then what about the psychic being?
The psychic being is the soul.
Ah, okay.
The psychic being is a developed soul. Okay, so so again, if the spiritual element soul continues to exist after dissolution of the body, then it must be a spiritual immortal element which existed before birth of body. We read that. An immortal spiritual entity cannot be created for such an ephemeral brief period of time to inhabit a mortal material body. It must be quite independent of the existence or non-existence of the body. The Srimad is slowly taking you to, there is more to birth and death than just the physical body. There is a soul that comes in. He is taking you to that level. We read the next one?
Oh yeah, we have 15 minutes at least.
We'll read the next one.
So, and it's a short para.
Again, we can assume that where we see in time a certain stage of development, there must have been a past to that development. Therefore, if the soul enters this life with a certain development of personality, it must have prepared it in other precedent lives here or elsewhere. Or if it only takes up a ready-made life and personality, not prepared by it, prepared perhaps by physical, vital or mental heredity, it must itself be something quite independent of that life and personality, something which is only fortuitously connected with the mind and body and cannot therefore really be affected by what is done or developed in this mental and bodily living. If the soul is real and immortal, not a constructed being or figure of being, it must also be eternal, beginningless in the past, even as endless in the future. But if eternal, it must be either a changeless self, unaffected by life and its terms, or a timeless Purusha, an eternal and spiritual person, manifesting or causing in time a stream of changing personality. If it is such a person, it can only manifest this stream of personality in a world of birth and death by the assumption of successive bodies. In a word, by constant or by repeated rebirth into forms of nature. So, now Srimad is taking up another thing. He says that when you see a certain condition, there is a development of a development, and that development must have had, how did it come to this stage of developed stage? It must have developed from something else. So he is saying that there must be something before that. And you see in all men that there is levels of understanding, levels of development. The animal has less development. The man has more development. Even in the animals you see that there are sections where there is less development and more development. So if there is this sequence, then it must have come from a stage where there was hardly any development. Slowly it has come up to this level. This is the argument being given. I read the summary. Next, we may assume reasonably enough. Now look, Srebda is examining all the possibilities, hypotheses one by one, and seeing which is reasonable. He is not discussing his experience that rebirth is a fact. He is looking at it logically one by one. Okay. Next, we may assume reasonably enough that when there is a development of personality, there are clearly various stages of development in men. That development implies a previous evolution. Okay? This development could have occurred in two ways. Preparation of personality in previous lives, or if the development is in the body, life and mind complex through heredity, then the soul is entering into a ready-made body-mind life entity and has nothing to do with a mortal temporary tenement. In other words, the soul cannot be affected by the life and the activities of our body-mind life. So what he is saying is two possibilities. One is that the development at this stage has been prepared by previous lives. It's a supposition. Or if that is not the thing, and you see that the the soul which is coming in is eternal, then it cannot be subject to the development in the body-mind life. It is independent of the body-mind life. So, the soul, which is a spiritual entity, not an artificially constructed one as in the Christian theory, must be immortal and eternal, that is, without beginning or end. If so, it must be a changeless entity, or it could be a person or Purusha developing and growing by repeated incarnation in physical lives. This brings us to rebirth. So he is examining one by one, and he says that first he says it's not only physical. So there is something else which is created. So it could be that God has created, and that there are too many logical inconsistencies we have to reject. So there is a soul which is eternal and coming into the body, and that does not depend upon the body-mind life. Therefore it must be eternal and immortal. So the question of rebirth comes in. But the immortality or eternity of the soul does not at once impose itself. Now see, this is Sri Aurobindo's way of logic. He gives us solution and then he challenges the solution himself. So thorough is his logic and his honesty of examining a thing. Okay? It could be this, okay, let's see what are the problems. Now he is saying that. He is saying the immortality of soul is a solution. Now he is saying, but the immortality or eternity of the soul does not at once impose itself. It's not a logical necessity. Okay? Let's examine the other possibilities. So, even if we reject the explanation of all things by eternal matter, for we have also the hypothesis of the creation of a temporary or apparent soul by some power of the original unity from which all things began, by which they live and into which they cease. On the one side, we can erect upon the foundation of certain modern ideas or discoveries the theory of a cosmic inconscient creating a temporary soul, a consciousness which after a brief play is extinguished and goes back into the inconscient. Or there may be an eternal becoming which manifests itself in a cosmic life force with the appearance of matter as one objective end of its operations and the appearance of mind as the other subjective end. The interaction of these two phenomena of life force creating our human existence. On the other side, we have the old theory of soul existing superconscient, an eternal unmodifiable being which admits or creates by Maya an illusion of individual soul life in this world of phenomenal mind and matter, both of them ultimately unreal, even if they have or assume a temporary and phenomenal reality. Since one unmodifiable and eternal self or spirit is the only entity. Or we have the Buddhistic theory of a nihil or nirvana, and somehow imposed upon that an eternal action or energy of successive becoming, karma, which creates the illusion of a persistent self or soul by constant continuity of associations, ideas, memories, sensations, images. In their effect upon the life problem, all these three explanations are practically one, for even the superconscient is for the purposes of the universal action an equivalent of the inconscient. It can be aware only of its own unmodifiable self-existence. The creation of a world of individual beings by Maya is an imposition on this self-existence. It takes place perhaps in a sort of self-absorbed sleep of consciousness, sushupti, out of which yet all active consciousness and modification of phenomenal becoming emerge, just as in the modern theory of our consciousness, just as in the modern theory, our consciousness is an impermanent development out of the inconscient. In all three theories, the apparent soul or spiritual individuality of the creature is not immortal in the sense of eternity, but has a beginning and an end in time. Is a creation by Maya or by nature force or cosmic action out of the inconscient or superconscient, and is therefore impermanent in its existence. In all three, rebirth is either unnecessary or else illusory. It is either the prolongation by repetition of an illusion, or it's an additional revolving wheel among the many wheels of the complex machinery of the becoming, or it is excluded, since a single birth is all that can be asked for by conscious being, fortuitously engendered as part of an inconscient creation. So, I told you this is a very difficult chapter. So, here what he is saying is that I have said that an eternal soul could enter into this one. But let us examine why should the eternal soul exist at all. Let's see whether other expressions are there. So, that is what he is examining. Okay? So, we will have to do this again next time in detail, because the logic is very clear. Would you like me to read the summary?
Yes.
Okay. But immortality does not necessarily impose itself even if we reject materialism. There can be other theories that account for an apparent soul without immortality. Logically, it could be like that. You can have a soul which is not immortal. Okay? If a created body can be mortal, then why not also a subtle body which is mortal? Okay? So, these theories all affirm the birth of temporary soul from a cosmic vast and again its extinction in its origin. So, yes, okay, there is a soul, it is created and also dies. Okay. First one modern idea, élan vital of Bergson, would be the basis of such a theory. Okay. Then there is a universal life force which bases itself on matter as the objective end and creates mind as the subjective, and the interaction of these two creates our human existence. So, this is the first theory, that a soul is created, but it is created by matter and life and disappears. The second theory, the Mayavada theory, affirms the superconscient as a sole reality which creates by its power of Maya an illusion of phenomenal reality in which individual soul life is a temporary episode which turns out finally to be an unreality illusion. Third theory, the Buddhistic theory, is a nirvana nihil upon which is superimposed an eternal energy of motion which takes the form of successively linked cause and effect. This is called karma. The Buddhistic theory is a nirvana nihil upon which is superimposed an eternal energy of motion which takes the form of successively linked cause and effect. This is called karma, which creates the illusion of a persistent soul by a series of linked events, ideas, associations, memories. Ultimately, all three really do the same thing as far as the practical life is concerned. In all three, a superconscient or an inconscient is a basic reality on which is imposed the illusion of an individual soul existence. In all three, the soul is not immortal. In all three, a superconscient or an inconscient, that we read just now, sorry. All three, rebirth is unnecessary or illusory. So it's a complicated para. We'll have to look at it carefully again. Same thing, examining all sorts of possibilities. So,
one unrelated question.
yeah.
Did Mother say anything about the burial of the body or the burning?
No, I don't think she said anything like that. The body is...
Many have chosen burial.
Yeah.
Many chose
Burning.
burning.
Yeah. And some have even chosen that I will give it for research, my body. Or you can take organs out and use them for other people. Mother has not said anything about that.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all. And we will see you again on Monday. We'll be on page 775 to 776.